Hi everyone. In this screencast, we will try to fix a very, very awkward sentence using some of the techniques and methods and philosophy that are outlined in the course materials that we have been looking at. So here is the specimen. There is in our community a hint of an idea that how stay-at-home parents are the parents who are considered to be more important in decision making in general by our community than those mothers and fathers or other qualified adults who are working at a job while raising our own kids. Okay, first of all, let me say I'm sorry for making you listen to that. And second of all, I'm not sorry in a way, in that this also shows the power of reading your work aloud to make it as clear as you possibly can. Nonetheless, when we draft, we often ramble all over the place. That's how the mind works. But now it's time to go back and refine what it is that we have put out into the world. So one of the first things to ask when you have a sentence like this, it needs help, is try to remind yourself or get back in touch with what it is that you really wanted to say. What was it that you were trying to get across here? There might have been some time between when you wrote it and when you're revising it. So just try to approximate it as best you can. And so from what I can glean here, this had something to do with the community's perceptions of parents and who gets to make what decisions, and it seems to be based on whether or not they're at home or not. That's the best I can do for now, and that's going to just be what we start with. Um, you have an opportunity when you do this kind of work to take advantage of grammar, of having a certain knowledge base in English. You don't have to be a grammar expert to recognize that well-crafted sentences in English have a subject, and our brains are wired to recognize what the subject is. Along with seeing the subject, we can usually pick out the verb pretty quickly, meaning the verb that seems to be most associated with the subject seems to be doing the subject's bidding. And so when you're revising a sentence, once you've figured out what it was maybe you were trying to say, another great question to ask is, who is the star of the show here? Who is the subject? What is this sentence mainly about? And it might be tempting upon a read of this to think that the subject is parents or children, just because of the amount of times those terms come up. But the true subject here, who's actually taking action and doing things, is the community. And so we're just going to start there with a rewrite. So our community. What is our community doing? Well, here's where it gets tricky. Okay, they're viewing parents in a certain way, or they're considering them. We can go right with the word that's here. So we can say our community considers. Okay, so notice how in the original community is here. Consider doesn't appear till this line. I've also made this an active verb instead of a passive one. So instead of saying are considered, I'm saying considers. Our community considers what? We consider stay-at-home parents. Just save some labor here, I'll do a little paste. Okay, so our community considers stay-at-home parents to be what? Okay, more important than others, it seems. Yeah, and so now that we've gotten through the basics of figuring out the subject, figuring out the verb, now we want to see what else was trapped in an awkward construction here with some modifiers that just don't seem to go anywhere or point to anything. So we can, again, try to retain some of what we had here. Our community considers stay-at-home parents to be more important for decision making than those parents who what? Okay, they're working and raising kids. And there's only so much you can cram into one sentence. And so you also will go through this natural act of realizing that actually you just need a different sentence for some of this, or maybe even a whole new paragraph. And that's part of the magic of editing. Not rock. Okay, so I found out who the star of the show was. I found out who the subject was. I figured out what the subject was doing, and then I filled it out with additional information. Now I want to go back to the original and see if there are any other changes I could make to get it closer to what I meant. The tendency is sometimes when we revise sentences to just make them extremely short and actually cut everything out of them that we wanted to say to begin with, which we don't have to do, but it is important to get these very early steps finished first. So it seems that also with this awkward construction here, a hint of an idea that, okay, which is flat out wordy and you could cut and never think about it again and be just fine for it. But we want to maybe hang on to the idea of hinting, okay, because it sounds as though they're not really positive about this, and maybe they don't have any evidence that this is what happens. So how can we fold that idea back in without doing something super clumsy like a hint of an idea? We could say, this, our community seems to consider. So we're just walking it back a little bit, okay, but allowing for that a little bit of that hintiness, a little of that suggestive quality that was here. Okay, and then the person was also just, it seems like trying to get everything out at once, which is admirable, but not necessarily going to work for written prose here. Mothers, fathers, or other qualified adults. I mean, I get it, and we want to acknowledge all different kinds of people are involved in a caregiving, but here this idea is just a little distracting, especially since we didn't really think this was a topic that we were concerned with here. But nonetheless, though, how can we fold it back in? How can we try to represent it as clearly as possible? The writer might try something like this, just to maybe create a little bit more openness. This is just one rewrite of this sentence. I'm sure any of you could come up with something as equally as successful. So let's look at what we have. Our community seems to consider stay-at-home parents to be more important for decision-making than those caregivers who work outside the home. I don't know about you, but I am heaving a sigh of relief. I think it's better than the original. And then based on how I'm feeling about it, looking at it, I'm going to change this to in. Okay, so this is just meant to be a quick demo of how to work very, very carefully with a sentence to make sure that it is saying exactly what you want it to say.